Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Environment Podcast, where we explore the environment we see every day. I'm your host, Abigail Garofalo.
And I'm your co-host, Carla Griesbaum.
And today we are here with Agustin Jimenez, professor of zoology at SIU, and he is here to chat with us about zoonotic diseases and armadillos. Welcome, Agustin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Abigail. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we are excited to chat with you about this topic that has really come to the forefront in the last 5 years. I mean, it's always been at the forefront and something that a lot of us have been interested in, but I just feel like, too, when it comes to emerging diseases and where they come from. And then now we're talking about, too, like these species that are kind of exploring more and expanding their habitats kind of naturally a little bit. So I'm just really excited to learn more about this and take this opportunity this season to talk about it. So why don't we get started with you telling us about your work at SIU?
Well, I am a professor of zoology. In here, I joined SIU in 2009. I teach animal diversity and parasitology. Animal diversity is a survey course, sophomore level, during which we explain the diversity of animals. We use a phylogenetic perspective to explain the relationships and then how the shared ancestry help us explain and make predictions on aspects of their biology, the ecology, their interactions with the environment, and also their ability to grow, reproduce, and then like diversify. So this is to me is very close to me. I've been doing similar courses to this since I was a TA in graduate school, and then I also teach parasitology. Parasitology is a senior level course for which we basically study the diversity of metazoan parasites mainly, but we also include the diversity of several protozoans. And then that includes organisms such as malaria. There is like toxoplasmosis, it goes there. There is also leishmaniosis. Several of these pathogens that are mainly vector-borne that have seen an increase in the last few years in the recent past. Some of them actually reflect a formidable history, the history of us as Americans, how we are actually shaping the landscape to help reducing these diseases. As the case is malaria, that we sort of eradicated it from this place. Because malaria was endemic in Illinois until the 30s, the 1930s. And then we see how these organisms are coming back. So it is very helpful, and then we try to train this new generation of zoologists that are able to actually solve these problems and actually make predictions and help us alleviating the consequences that they might have. That links kind of like my interest in teaching with my research. So the research that I do revolves around the diversity of parasites. I am a specialist on nematodes, basically the roundworms, parasites that infect mainly, say, mammals. But when one says mammals from the perspective of a mammologist, that would be either bats or rats, because they are the most diverse. And I concentrate on a group of parasites that actually occurs in Chrysetids rodents, like your cotton rat, kind of like those little animals. But then also they have a group that goes into marsupials and armadillos. And they are like very common in the neotropic. When I started doing my investigations, when I was interested on this business of research, I was trying to study the patterns of coevolution, how these organisms are kind of like coevolving. But then when like really into my PhD, I discovered that when that happens, but it's far more interesting when these animals actually switch kind of like hosts, when they all of a sudden are like present in, they are like in your little kind of like marsupials, but then all of a sudden they are present in mice. And then you cannot explain that based on shared ancestry. I collaborate with people in several institutions from across the world, but I have very close colleagues in in SIU in the wildlife department, also in other universities in the state and across the country.
You mentioned that sometimes these parasites or these diseases, all of a sudden shift where they're not staying within one animal, they go to another species. How often does it happen where it spreads to humans?
Well, that one is relatively the kind of like when the pathogen comes in contact with people, that happens very frequently. However, our immune system is such that in most cases we're able to shut down that initial infection. See, like kind of like the pathogens come into our body, and then our body goes like, I'm going to switch you off. So we see that as an example with mosquito bites. In mosquito bites, we have like, see like how when it actually we have that reaction, that is like our immune system saying no. And not to not only one thing, but not to like a cocktail of nasty pathogens that are there. So from that perspective, the encounter is relatively frequent. I don't have a number to actually, and then that's actually very interesting. What would be that number? How could we explain to people how frequent that is, and how lucky we are of having this formidable immune system that we have? But then the next stage, the compatibility, that is kind of like the other filter that could be dealing with, that is less frequent because it depends of several things. And then in some of these circumstances, all of these conditions need to be met. One, that the host, the human being, is immunocompromised or sort of down. Or two, that we have a strain of the pathogen or a species that is formidable and evading any immune response that we can mount. Or that it is a novel kind of like site of infection, or sometimes the pathogen finds an organ that is not their typical target organ, and then they replicate. So from that, because of that, those conditions that are in most cases unpredictable, because we don't know the priors, we don't know the diversity, and we don't know what they do in nature. Then that is where we'll come with these surprises.
And you're dealing with, evolution, like you said. So if there's a mutation within one of these parasites, you don't know what it's going to do, right?
Yes, exactly. And then see, part of like my initial work is trying to study these phylogenies. And then in the phylogeny, you study the distribution of the pathogens. So let's say we go with the haplotypes, and we see where these haplotypes are. Are they kind of like, say, in mice? Although all of them are in mice of the one species, okay, that is fine. But then is when we get to clusters, to clades, that all of a sudden have the haplotypes in kind of like in mice, and then some others occur in pocket gophers, and some of those occur in marsupials. Then that is when we go like, ooh, wait, there is a strange pattern here, just evidenced by the genetic diversity. And then we need to start actually just like asking the questions of what mechanisms are favoring these parasites to act as generalists. Because basically they are good or able to survive and reproduce at least some in different hosts. Those are the pathogens that worry me. Those are kind of like the ones that I say, oh, kind of like let's keep a look on these ones. Oh no, they are fine. Well, they are fine if we keep them contained, but then it's like and then we have a tendency to modify the environment, to bring noise, and then that noise, that modification brings all of these organisms together to a melting pot that might bring up like some unprecedented outcomes.
Yeah. It makes me think about when we're thinking about restoration and like improving, a species' health in general. We think about, we want genetic diversity, right? Like we don't want only the same species in an area. That's what makes a species really susceptible to dying or failure or whatever. And so it's interesting. You're like, that same concept applies to things we don't want. When we see a lot of genetic diversity in these parasites, in these, diseases and things like that, we know that they have the better ability to thrive in other places that we might not want them. And so I'm just like, ooh, like that concept goes both ways. It's like a basic ecological concept, like genetic diversity is valuable to the survival of the species, whether you want it or not. And I'm like, oh, like my brain is a little blown. So
Yeah, it's like there is like we are humans, and then we think from the anthropocentric perspective. And then sometimes the things that are good for us maybe are not good for the environment, and the other way around is kind of like in this case, I feel that we need to start up identifying that part. It's like, okay, we modify the environment, then there will be a lot of these consequences that are going to come with that modification. And certainly we profit of those modifications for a short period of time. But then, kind of like even in less than one generation, we're going to start paying back for them. And then from that perspective, is kind of like sometimes difficult to make that cost prediction. Like kind of like we just go in and say, yeah, the name of the game is survival. Let's kind of like survive. Yeah, but then in that is going to cause reproduction. And you will have offspring, and then this offspring is going to have a hard time surviving. And then it's like going to be like, oh, yeah.
yeah. Ooh. Oh, so cool. Well, could you share an example of a recent or notable zoonotic disease event involving wildlife in North America?
Well, yes, there are several. There are several that actually some of them are notorious. But then see, like one is the avian influenza. The avian influenza that basically we started detecting in March, in February, went through kind of like April, in which we started seeing human cases. That one was sort of scary because that essentially this pathogen, this strain of this virus, shifted from marine um,
Avian species, right? Like those like shorebirds and yeah.
there you go. It switched into short sea lions, and then this in Argentina, like probably 3-4 years ago, and then from there, kind of like the disease expanded, like, and then disseminated with these shorebirds, and then the marine mammals, all the way to the other coast, from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific, and then it reached Peru, where it was killing, like it became more, let's say, pathogenic. The virus kind of like accumulated mutations that made it more aggressive in the pinnipeds, in the marine mammals that would live in that coast. And then from there, it just started propagating into like a wave northward until it reached America. And in the United States, we started seeing that disease mainly with cattle, like all of these organisms in crowded conditions, that once they kind of like were exposed to these birds that will come and then feed on the same feeding lots, then they kind of like created this chance of encounter between the pathogen and new hosts, and then the constant exposure just like get to the chance. And maybe one weak cow contracted the infection, and then poof, from there it went. In this case, that one goes, says wildlife, cattle, humans. But then another example includes hantavirus. Betsy Arakawa was a famous piano performer from New Mexico, and then she contracted this disease earlier this year. This disease is the causative agent of the hemorrhagic fever. There are several viruses that cause several kinds of hemorrhagic fever, and most of them are horrible. They induce fevers. They induce kind of like the damage the epithelium of several tissues, including the lungs, and then they cause some internal bleeding that is bad. And then the chance of mortality, even for people who are healthy, is up to 30%. So it's relatively high. So this person unfortunately passed away because then mice, like typically deer mice, these promiscuous manipulators. It's kind of like they come into the houses, they start like living there, and then as they leave, they defecate and they urinate in these places. And then once they accumulate all of this matter, the virus that is present in those tissues just becomes aerosolized and then might infect people who are cleaning. And then, it must be a constant exposure.
Yeah,
Oh, so
breathe that in even, right?
Yes.
yeah.
It's like just like when we clean the kind of like the garage, it's gonna or a chef. We go there and then I've been working with mice for 24 years, no 25 years. So essentially, when I go to houses, I know how to recognize the droppings of wild mice and the droppings of house mice. House mice are like kind of like I'm not super like but then kind of like the wild mice, I am more concerned, especially when I am in areas that are that I don't know if there is a high prevalence of the virus or whatever. Well, this infection was famous because then Betsy Arakawa was married to Jim Hackman, and then her passing, my of cows that she wouldn't take care of this famous actor, and he passed away 1 week after. So it's kind of like this cascading effect that brought this attention to this disease. That the pathogen, the virus was discovered in 1993 in the Four Corners area. And then this demonstrates that even when we try to control them, the pathogens are looking around, looking about in the environment, cycling in wildlife. And then provided this encounter exposes us to their infective agents, then things might go south.
It kind of shows me too, like the importance of like respecting and understanding wildlife, right? Like, and like understanding the ways, because a lot of the times in early on in the season, we talk with Joy O'Keefe about animal encounters, and like how it's valuable to like understand what you're dealing with and actually deal with it effectively, right? And like what is a risky, what is a like a encounter, what is a mundane encounter, like what are the differences between all of those things, and like then thinking about, okay, I have a mouse problem in my house. How am I actually, like, what is the actual problem here and how am I dealing with that? And then what are the things that go along with those pieces, instead of just being like, oh, if I just trap them, they'll go away. Well, something attracted them in the first place. So just kind of showcases to me the value and the importance of understanding our wildlife and just bringing this massive respect on this thing that like life will out. So like, let's understand it, and see how, we can work within these systems that are naturally occurring.
Yeah. And then this is basically the housing in the code. Let's say the code housing in America is borderline formidable because we're totally isolated from the external environments. Our isolation is efficient for keeping a stable temperature, which improves, say, the quality of life of people living in there. But then at the same time, it isolates us from external environments, including, elements, temperature and all of that, but then also insects, like say these small mammals, or like essentially we isolate ourselves, and then not noticing that these organisms are coming inside the house. That might be problematic. And then it's not only the one. It is like as you just perfectly say, Abigail. If you see one, they actually found their way, and then more will come, and then one needs to pay attention to those.
My favorite example I tell people is if they see a house centipede, I'm always like, those are predators. So if you have a house centipede, you have things that animal likes to eat. And they're always like, what? That's terrifying. And I'm like, well, like, know your animal, right? Like, you see it, you're not going to get rid of it by killing that house centipede. It's just coming for food. So, but.
And they say, mice, their heads are like smaller, like about as small as a dime. And so any hole that dimes they can fit through.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to find those places to cover up and like keeping your food sealed and all that, it's not just trapping them like Abigail said. You have to kind of stop it at the source.
Yeah. But then see that in a way, I wish that people would appreciate that notion that you're describing right now, because then in that way, people get the feeling that they are detectives, that they need to solve a problem. That the problem is not only this, it's a notion, the notion that the mouse can fit for wherever their head fits. And then from that, with that idea, then the individuals, everybody, should be kind of like going around and then try to troubleshoot that problem.
Right.
It sounds like, man, yeah, we do it every day, but then might be discovered that not everybody thinks that way. Yeah, that's why we have like poisons for rats, or like the traps, because then people kind of like use that convenient devices to basically give away that opportunity, the opportunity to become a detective.
Right.
No, it is not more than it's like that is the scientific process right there in your house, in your garage, that you can do on your own. To me, that is one of those opportunities that I always tell my kids, like friends, hey, while this is happening, what would you do? And then just like seeing kind of like the connection in their eyes when they make it, it's amazing.
Well, Augustine, we always get this question when it comes to almost anything, and it has to do with climate change. How is climate change and shifting animal ranges affecting the spread of these diseases?
Oof. It is, see, like essentially when you see the armadillos, when you see ticks, when you see mosquitoes, it's not, it's, they are essentially climate change. They are like, it's not the hair, it's them. And then let us explain this with like another example. Like I was going to save it by the end to the end, but then this is one of those impressive elements that I saw since I arrived to SIU to Carbondale. So I came here, and then all of a sudden we had, like one part that I really love about Southern Illinois is the public lands, the ability to just like drive 10 minutes and be in a state park or in the national forest, public land, and then just like go around, hike, no end. Most of the hiking trails are well maintained and they are easy to do in the morning. But then all of a sudden, this is about like 2010, 2012, 2013, we started seeing ticks like crazy. And then the encounter with ticks became like kind of like more like greater and greater, to the point that by the mid tens, 2016, 2017, we get to see these ticks in our backyards. Kind of like we have like so many mammals that are moving around that they are bringing these ticks. And then we started just identifying these ticks, and then it's like, yeah, it's like a non-star tick. Yeah, what's the big deal? Let's kind of like keep moving around. But then it was when I went back, and then we started checking the fact that they were not supposed to be here. That they were supposed to kind of like be there, like kind of like in southern Kentucky, like southern Arkansas, and then just be there. But then as we detected them, then we just kept like checking them. And then I don't remember the authors, but then they documented. They basically just wrote an article saying, "Hey, these ticks are already kind of like in the central part of Indiana and the central part of Illinois. Somebody needs to be doing something." That was Dr. Allen from U of I, by the way. Kind of like they come up with this play-by-play movement and expansion. So in that case, we are having so milder winters that the survival of these ticks during the winter, their chance of surviving increases. So during the winter, like if you are feeding on the summer times and then just like consuming stuff, you might have energy to survive the winter. I don't know what ticks do in the winter. They go on the ground. I don't know if they're going to Dasypus, but then in the summer or in the spring, they are expected to come back. But if the temperatures are too low, that will kill them. Well, it is probably our temperatures are not long enough to kill them all. And it just take a few of those surviving organisms to start just reproducing, and then just like bringing all of these ticks into the environment. Now, since we're with arthropods, and then I bring these because they are vectors of diseases. And in this case, these ticks vector rickettsial parasites. They also vector some babesiosis, Babesia microti-like, and other species. But they also infect one element, the pathogen that we know as Cytoxan felis. That is the causative agent of the bobcat fever. Bobcats are innocuous to that disease. Like kind of like most of the bobcats that we have screened in southern Illinois are infected, but they seem fine. However, when this pathogen infects domestic cats, if that cat is not treated, it has a 70% chance of being killed by the infection because of the size difference, and then the differences in the physiology of the immune response of the domestic cat against the parasite. Actually, you like bring a cascade that this is the own immune system of the domestic cat is actually killing parts of the cat, and it's the active infection and then the response against the infection that take a high toll on the life of these animals. So that is kind of like one of those diseases that is now more common because of this expansion. To cat owners, that is terrible. But then also it's terrible because it increases our exposure to this babesia. Babesiosis is a disease not to be messed up with.
I was going to add too, like, I'm not familiar with how prominent feral cats are in the southern Illinois, but I know that it is like a common issue, like feral house cats in the wild. And so I'm just like, makes me think of that too. And then also properly treating, like keeping your cats indoors. We say that we're like, please keep your cats inside. Yeah, interesting.
No. It almost seems like there's two parts coming into it. We've got not only is sort of warming temperatures expanding the range for all these host animals, but then the ticks, like, these vectors get in the ground, and the warm weather also makes them survive more readily. So it's kind of like a two-punch effect.
Is the effect on the entire ecosystem. And then if you allow me to insist a little bit, and then since we're into arthropods, now we have mosquitoes. And then mosquitoes, depend on temperature to complete their development, depend on stagnant water. And if you have stagnant water for a greater period of time, and if your summer extends, kind of like in the season extends, to actually just sustain these organisms, this reproduction, then it's not only that they have, like, say, so the life cycle of a mosquito takes 21 days, more or less. So then in a normal summer with proper rain, you might have 2, maybe 3 cycles the most. But then if you have like a greater period of like high temperatures, you might have 4 or 5. That signifies that you're going to have a bunch more of mosquitoes that are going to be acting as vectors of nasty diseases. And the worst part is that is associated also with the temperature in winter. If the temperature in winter, as we described in before, is mild enough, it won't kill a lot of the mosquitoes that are in diapause. They might survive. And then it's further worse. What we have seen is that in January, if the temperature is mild, sometimes it reaches like 60 degrees and it's sunny, and then you get to see mosquitoes moving around. And then it's like another blood meal that they take that increases their chance to survival. So this is a direct connection of this climate change. This way I say that this is why, to me, mosquitoes and ticks are global change. They are climate change. They are like our weather system, temperature, rainfall. All of that has been modified so that they are able to survive because they are telling you, well, all the conditions for me to survive are here. So I like it.
Yeah. I feel like the milder winter ones is like one we always typically think of, right? Like for those who aren't familiar with insects, like usually it's about like the length of time for cold that's really important for like reducing insect prevalence. They can survive in their certain winter state for so many cold or freezing days or something below a certain temperature, depending on the species. So they have to meet that threshold to reduce the population, or eliminate it completely, depending. Like that's what kind of keeps species ranges in check. And so when we extend those milder winters, and there are not as many of those really cold freezing days over time, or they're sporadic, right? We're like Augustine was saying, like we're increasing those chances. What I didn't consider was the mosquito life cycle and how many more opportunities they have to reproduce with those, like, because we're seeing the same amount of rain in Illinois, but we're seeing it in big periods with dry periods in between. And so like a big rainfall event and then a longer dry period. So that's allowing that water to stay stagnant without it flowing as often, and giving them more opportunity, and then refilling it really quickly, right? Like I'm just like thinking about that, and I'm just, I didn't think about that. There's more chances for life cycles. It's not just that they don't die off and they're coming more. So again, Carla, that 1-2 punch, right? Not as many are dead, and they have more chances to reproduce.
Yeah.
Man.
And that links to also the survival and the mystery of the armadillos. Because then the armadillos, the armadillos, to me, they are super adorable. They are cute. But then they are like essentially, they have very, they don't have a lot of fur. They have hairs, mainly in the ventral side. But then their body is essentially skin that includes osteoderms that are very well at like losing heat. They kind of like absorb heat because they are more or less compact and they retain it. But then their body is like this, like, a mittens surface that just releases this heat. Mm-hmm. And then, furthermore, since they are mainly insectivorous, they are omnivorous, but then 75% of their diet is insects. Since that happens, they are consuming a lot of dirt. And then that makes that their metabolism is kind of like in the slow end. In short, they are like not like super homeotherms, like you might think of another a mammal of a similar size, but they are like there. As a consequence, we predicted for years that these organisms could be very limited by the freezing temperatures. And if there were freezing temperatures, these organisms would not be able to survive. And then say, we're talking about 1993 in the past, let's say in the early mid-90s, people predicted that these animals will never reach Kentucky, that they will never kind of like go to like this. They might get the southern part of Missouri, but that was it. That was kind of, and then all of a sudden we start seeing them like, hey, man, they are like around Peoria. How do we explain that? Well, like the long dispersal organisms that have. Well, there is another in Lincoln, Nebraska. How do we explain that? And then became a population to motivate people to actually revise these predictions. To make these predictions, essentially what people were using was the presence of the organism linked to the environmental variables that are there. And then they use just computer programs to calculate the probability of the animal to survive in other locations that have these very similar conditions. And then with that factor, they make those predictive ranges. It's based on physical evidence, the evidence of the animal, but then in this link to kind of like the conditions that favor or help us explain the presence of these organisms there. But then as the time has happened, we have never tested the actual physiology of the organisms. Kind of like, like in the winter, how low their temperature actually, how low is low? What is the threshold of these organisms to survive? What is their body temperature? What are the fluctuations in the wild or even in the laboratory? So since we don't have those answers, then we're a little bit in the dark making these predictions of how far they are going to go. It is like until we have like this data, we will understand literally their superpower. There's their power over their ability to either adapt or tolerate the cold temperatures that we have in the north. It is to me it is kind of like very hard to explain how they survive in the winter, especially because then there are some years that we have the super vortex. Do you guys remember those?
Yeah,
Right.
the polar vortex. I'm sure we could get Dwayne to come back from retirement to explain it to us, or we'll link it to if he has an episode on something like that. But anyways, continue.
During those episodes, the animals go out, then they move around, and it's like they are not super active. We don't see a lot of them, but they move. They kind of like go, and then we're like, yeah, well, what is happening? In January, again, days on 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the animals are moving around. So in a way that is like, okay, we have a lot of things to explain, but we don't have a lot of the evidence that will help us come up with explanations based on observations and testing.
So much to learn, I feel like, too. Like, I feel like that's telling me, like, don't count him out. Don't count it out, whatever it is. So
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the temperature was a limiting factor, and then we're identifying that temperature is probably not one of the main factors that explain their survival. What we're seeing is there are two aspects there are several aspects that explain their survival and presence across Illinois. One is the habitat. The habitat in Illinois is essentially the southern part is swampy in several regions. In addition of the swamps, there are like creeks, there are rivers. We have two majestic rivers that kind of like surround the area. And guess what? These animals are riparian. They love it. They love kind of like those habitats. And the temperature is like, it's very, I might even venture to say that now it appears to be subtropical. It's not subtropical, it's an exaggeration that I am making, but then the temperature is very warm during a lot of the year. And then in addition, all of the landscape that we have, instead of being a barrier, just basically a forest that is homogeneous, is highly fragmented. So we have roads, we have like a big yard, like a big lawn, like right there in the middle of the forest, and like a land for cows. And then these animals love the edges. And they love the edges not because it's a wonderful place to be, because they are going to find a lot of larvae of insects that are going to be in the ground, a lot of earthworms, and then also a lot of decaying matter that they can use for survive. And then since we have modified the environment and do some digging, then it is easier for them to dig through those surfaces. They are amazing diggers anyway, but then in that manner, they are just moving and then increasing their chances for motility.
I was thinking about we talked with Kevin Rolling earlier this season as well as about road ecology and how we're like creating essentially these edge habitats all over. And we mainly talked about how like that's negative interactions, but there are many species that love edge habitats, and it creates much more of that for a lot of these spaces across. Now, we kind of, what you were mentioning was like these negative impacts, or I guess like these impacts that humans have had that have created this ecosystem that's kind of positive for our armadillos. What kinds of impacts are armadillos having on the ecosystem that they're now inhabiting with their expanded range?
Well, there are several. See, say we are in this line of the insects. We can see the very same dietary preference, or as something that will bring negative and positive outcomes. And it depends of who is saying this. Say, if they are consuming a lot of insects, then in kind of like areas nearby, kind of like the agricultural landscape, one might say or might expect that they might be controlling the pests for those agricultural systems. However, they don't like the agricultural landscape. They kind of like they leave it alone. They only go to forest. This a grad student here in SIU kind of like built a model to actually that shows that they don't like it. They sometimes are present there, but they don't thrive. Then that brings the aspect they still need insects, and they still need to consume them. What insects are they feeding on? Well, bumblebees or bees in diapause, like other insects that are in diapause, and then they kind of like go underground. They have an amazing olfaction system, and they will dig it and get them. So in that case, they might have an effect on the entomological fauna of the area. For they're more kind of like, yeah, they are insectivorous, but then if the opportunity is there, they will eat an egg. They will slurp a snake. If it fits through their mouth, they will do it. They don't
slurp a snake. I'm sorry. That idea is so funny of an armadillo.
Those little decays brown snakes, perfect size, like noodles.
So well, imagine just to them like a big earthworm and a snake are not just they are there. They are protein. Let's eat them. And we have found several species of snakes in the guts of armadillos, mainly south. I haven't found one in Illinois, but then that moment will make me sad. But then I will also document it. But then the situation is that by doing this, they might affect those animals that lay eggs in the ground, and to that effect, they are a problem in some southern states with some bobwhites, I think, that kind of like that's the ground nesting birds that are like they are exposed. Also, box turtles are like there is a mix of organisms that might suffer the consequences of this. On the other side, they also move a lot of dirt, kind of like they are aerating this environment, and then as they go digging, they are actually mixing the nutrients that are in the soil, and they are creating habitats for other animals that might live through. So in here in campus, essentially in campus, we have deployed a few camera traps that actually show when the armadillos come and dig a hole, then they use it for a week or two, and then they just move about, and then all of a sudden groundhog is sharing it, and that is common with a lot of medium-sized mammals. But then these armadillos are kind of like building a housing for these organisms as well.
Interesting. Bioturbation. I love to hear it.
How are you tracking the armadillo's population and growth into Illinois?
Well, see, like for a number of years, we were following them with camera traps. That activity has also been expanded by Dr. Guillaume Bastille-Rousseau and his team. They have like cameras like all over the state. They're kind of like in the forest, and then that has helped them predicting the patterns of behavior, time of the day, kind of like corridor these circumstances. However, that those patterns of activity do not answer the question of how is their population doing, because to do that we need the power of analysis of population genetics. As I was telling you, when kind of like we go and collect them, we collect a very few of them. When we find the roadkills, say my wife kind of like sometimes makes fun of me, because then in my phone I use the phone to georeference the habitat, but she's like kind of like goes to pictures of cute kids, cute girls, moments, and then a roadkill that is kind of like there. But I do it to actually georeference the site. I take the organisms, and then as I bring them in, basically we extract the digestive system, because I'm trying to keep track of the parasites that are already present in Texas, in Louisiana, Florida. they are going to eventually show up here. So I go and check. But as I told you earlier, I was trained to document and archive other parts of the body. So basically, we take tissue samples that we're going to screen for other pathogens or for their genetic diversity. And once we accumulate enough resources on tissues and also the resources in the availability to actually just secure the funding for doing this work, we are studying now the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms, that across the genome of the armadillos, we have found that about like 1,400, like 1,400 of these SNPs. No, it's not 14,000. No, let's go with 14. Let's go with a lot.
Those are two big different numbers.
Yes,
But just
really
a lot, yeah.
No, but then that actually allows to see their homogeneity or heterogeneity.
Mhm.
And then when basically see like when we were into it, we were like, yeah, what is it going to happen? See the armadillos. What do they have going for them? They live there, but then every single time that they reproduce from one egg, 4 pups are going to kind of like be born. So they are polyembryonic. Then further, they have delayed implantation. Kind of like if there is impregnation, the pups might come up this spring, and then they might come next spring. The mother might die. So from those aspects, also we were thinking they are moving very fast. See, since 1849 to 2025, they have moved like linearly 1,700 kilometers. So they are kind of like moving very fast. And then as a consequence, essentially we were thinking all of them are going to be clones. We're not going to be able to tell them apart because it's a front of expansion. There won't be anything to see. But then some of my collaborators started doing the screening, and they started identifying that there were like 2 lineages. One that comes straight from Mexico, crossing the border between Texas and Mexico, and the other one that comes kind of like from Florida. That are kind of like it's the source of a putative colony or like a release. Now it was involuntary, but then it happened there. But then all of a sudden, this one is his name. He's in the University of Miami in Ohio. So he started checking all of this diversity, and he identified that there was heterogeneity on the basin of the Mississippi. That they were like very heterozygous. That they were mixing a lot. And furthermore, he used that very same data to calculate their dispersion rate, and he discovered that they are using the Mississippi as a interstate. They are kind of like going back and forth, and then they are so well mixed. I mean, they are still part of the same species, the Dasypus mexicanus, the species that we recognize now. But then they have like this corridor that allows them their breeding. So from there, it's kind of like what is going to happen next, and this is exciting because then as I was driving through Missouri, so I went to Kansas City. I usually go to St. Louis because it's close, and then I have family there. So but then usually when we go even to Colombia, we get to see occasionally roadkills, but then most of them are concentrated kind of like before Fallon, even just Waynesville, kind of like they are going to be very close to our river, to the Mississippi. But then as far as we were going, they were we were finding them all over the interstate. So I sent an email to the people in the Missouri Department of Conservation to see if people having seen a lot. And then they saying, yeah, we receive a lot of calls, but then there is nothing we can do. But in my mind, I'm thinking that if these animals are using the Mississippi as an interstate, they already hit the corner in St. Louis, and they are going to get the other interstate, that is the Missouri, and then they are going to go west. And who knows what is going to happen there, because then there is slightly more northern than we are. And then I wonder if they are going to increase their panmictic population. They have opportunities to survive, reproduce, and then do things that armadillos do. And then it brings to me kind of like the underscores the relevance of the rivers for these organisms, because then we still have the northern part of the Mississippi. These animals have been found in Peking, Quincy, in those parts of Illinois where they are not expected to be. But then we have a lot of forested areas in the western part of the state that might act as good habitat for these organisms. And then again, if this population has the ability, the physiological ability to either tolerate the temperatures or either going to brumation or torpor, I don't know what they do, but they are surviving the winter, then they might actually find new opportunities there to have another pressure of select, like another pressure that might actually come up or favor the selection of a new physiological threat.
Yeah, the value of like collecting that data that you were talking about in the beginning too is like so important, because some of this like genetic analysis we didn't have the ability to do at some point. So getting all of that data down, we don't know what kind of technologies will exist in 20 years that will help us really track them and understand them. Well, as we're trying to understand just like our current situation and what to expect in the future, what should Illinois residents know about, living near armadillos, or like just things to watch out for, things to know, just like we were talking about with the mouse, right? Like it's important to understand the species that we're having this new exposure to.
Well, these animals are here to stay. At least in the south of I-70, they are around. They are going to be common. See, last weekend, I was having kind of like just just kind of like having a good time with some of my neighbors. And then we were having a conversation, and then just underneath their deck, there was an armadillo that started foraging. And then we followed the animal until it kind of like went to the other side of the house. So they are going to be present not only in the field, but also in the cities. We are thinking that they are going to find like these sources of heat in cities, and then they are going to be a very common encounter for us because of their foraging behavior. They have a trend to destroy the gardens, the lawns, and this will actually kind of like have a one of those unwanted wildlife people interactions in which they are affecting property.
Yeah.
The other concern is that I still don't know. We don't know. What I know is that the organisms that we have screened for pathogens here, they are clean. No, we need to check again, but then they are clean, which means that the prevalence, if the pathogens are here, it is still low. But then to that effect is like, yeah, but then we just said that the animals have an interstate in the river, so they are going to kind of like form this population that might facilitate, number one, the transmission of the of Mycobacterium leprae or the other species that cause leprosy, that we still don't know how it is transmitted, which is like a big kind of like scary moment right there for everybody. But then the other element is that we don't know what are going to be their effects on people, because what we know is that not everybody is going to be compatible with the pathogen. The majority of people, even when we're exposed, we are not going to contract the disease. However, we know that immunocompromised individuals kind of like might have the propensity to facilitate the survival and reproduction of this pathogen. This pathogen is like, it is amazing how they are alive, because they replicate in a very slow fashion. The bacteria, all of the members of Mycobacterium have like a super weird cellular wall. So you have the bacteria, the cell membrane, but then it has the first cellular wall, then a layer of lipids, and another cellular wall. Kind of like it is like a sandwich that takes
Yeah.
for to build, and because of this, it takes them forever to replicate. So for some person to actually just kind of like manifest the symptoms of the disease of leprosy, that takes a long while. Anyway, this long kind of explanation goes to say that we need to be respectful with the animals, and it would be better to leave them alone. They don't kind of create or become permanent in a single location. They are going to be moving around. You might be able to see them in this place for 2 weeks, then they are going to move away. And then sometimes when they get scared, they kind of they just go in a new place and then make a new home. That's their ability. In that sense, their home range is not for the one individual. At least on the ones that we've seen in Illinois, for the one individual resides in this hectare at this surface, and that is theirs. They will be moving around. But since we're getting to see an increase, then others will move around. Now, if people in the audience know that there is somebody with immunocompromised at home, and they see one of these animals, it might be kind of like recommendable to call animal control to take them away. Just kind of like chew them out. Then you don't want them nearby. But then if people on, like say, on other conditions with an immune system that is optimal, or is basically I don't know how to say that, but then with a competent immune system, the recommendation would be to prevent the contact with the animals. The animals are very easy to grab, so essentially they don't see well. They don't see well at all. The only thing that gets them going is the noises. Kind of like you can get next to them, and then I've been able to just grab them like from the shell, kind of like like as if it was just a bucket. Mm, and they are just like helpless. But when they get scared by noises, they dart away. So that is a recommendation. So in plain English, the recommendation to everybody is prevent encounter with the animals. You can see them and appreciate them in all their glory from a respectful distance. And then in this case, even a respectful distance might be like 6 feet or even slightly closer. But then that could be enough. Prevent touching them, because then we have seen animals with kind of like unique patterns of the coloration in their shell in Illinois that I unfortunately have not been able to go and test for the presence of the pathogen. I mentioned this because then that the coloration might be one of the symptoms of the disease in armadillos. So it's like kind of like just start watching out. And if you see one of those animals that look kind of like not uniform color, let them go away and call me, because I might actually be interested on.
Sure.
getting
So keep your distance, as in
distance.
protect your home. Like we talked about mice earlier. What else can the public do to help reduce these zoonotic disease transmissions?
Oh, like see, that goes even further. See, like I would actually prevent the other animals, wild animals, to come relatively close to one's property. I mean, we cannot avoid them. They in the middle of the night, all of these animals are going through. But then there is a trend that I've seen that I see is concerning to me. There are people who are allowing, say, raccoons and skunks to come into the inside the house, and sometimes they feed them the same food that they kind of like feed the cats and the dogs. So I would ask people to please stop doing that. That one is has several risks for people, for pets, and then also for the wildlife. So there are several diseases that we have going around that affect mainly animals and say carnivores. So canine distemper and these diseases that affect dogs, well, they are super common in raccoons and skunks, and their transmission is like just airborne. It's just like they are close together. One animal is breathing, exhales, particles of the pathogen go in, the other animal breathes in those particles and then contracts the infection, and then the pathogen knows.
Yeah, try and keep your dog 6 feet away. Like, good luck with that. I giggle about that in I had a face. I'm like, audio medium, Abigail, explain what's going on with your face. Because I'm like, those raccoons do not need your help. They're good. They don't need you to feed them. Trust me.
No, yeah, there is the other aspect of also part of human nature. Lots of people want to help an individual raccoon, but then in terms of how the population of raccoons does in Illinois, is like, man, these animals are thriving. They don't need our help. I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't want to see them suffer, but it's like, oh, they are fine. Especially these animals that are synanthropic, that profit from our presence, from our ways, from our modification. We don't need to feed them. They are going to find our food even when we don't want them to find it. And then that is an aspect to consider. And this is important because then these animals, as they go back and move into the forest, they are going to kind of like form these communal dennings. It's kind of like when the animals are in the forest in the winter, they find a burrow, a hole, they go in, but then in the same hole, we have seen bobcats, that's kind of like living with a raccoon, and then there is also a possum, and then sometimes chipmunks are in the very back, which actually like it mixes all of these potential pathogens or increases the likelihood for that to happen. So that is something that we would like to people to consider. That we see the animal coming in, but we never know what the other interactions of the animal has just done, how it has engaged with other elements.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, Agustin, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on zoonotic diseases, on armadillos, all the things that we can just know more. I feel like I could talk to you much longer because I'm just so intrigued by all the things. And this is just a topic I don't know a lot about. But we have to move on because we're going to finish today's episode with one of my favorite segments, Everyday Observations, where we highlight the mundane and normal of our environment that is actually really interesting. So, Carla, I'm going to pick on you. You go ahead and go first.
Yeah, so we have been doing a lot of frog call monitoring lately. We have a new program here in East Central Illinois where we're monitoring frogs. And we were doing a training and we were going to do it outside, but it was storming. So I was like, okay, I need to get some frog calls to show these folks in order to practice. So there's 3 ponds in my neighborhood. And I said, okay, I'll go to each one. I'll get a recording so they can try to pick out the frog calls. And these ponds are within a 1/4 mile radius, not very far from each other, but they all had different things in it. Like one pond had toads in it. The other 2 didn't. One pond had bullfrogs in it. The other one didn't. The other one had tree frogs. So it's just like they're so close together, but also there's something about each of these ponds that these frogs and toads found particularly good about that site, even though they're so close. So it was just kind of, I've never really paid attention to it before, but now that I have, I'm just like, oh, well, the tree frogs probably like this pond because there's more trees by it. That kind of makes sense. So that was just kind of an observation I've made lately in my own neighborhood.
Get to be a little detective, right? Like we were talking about.
Yeah.
Kind of ask those questions.
And if I might, this is another thing that I forgot, but then I relearned when one of my students was working with a project on tadpoles. But then from this allows people to inquire what explains this distribution, and it's not random. And then especially for the tadpoles of toads, how do these toads know that that pond, that paddle is ephemeral. You know, like kind of
Right.
they always use ephemeral ponds, and then you're like, those how do they know?
Yeah.
And what is their
Mhm.
perspective of time, distance?
Right.
I
Do
don't
they
know.
have a memory from last year or just
Yeah.
and they know?
Collective memory, like
Right.
monarchs, right? Oh, interesting. Oh, so cool. Well, my instant thought was like, oh, is it like, is there runoff going into one pond and not the other? Was like, is there something about the environmental quality of the ponds difference that is like, just kind of thinking
Maybe
about the
one
watershed.
person, yeah, maybe one person treats their pond and the other person doesn't, and that kind of makes the ecology different in each pond. I don't know.
Yeah, so many opportunities to learn. All right, Augustine, go ahead and tell me what your everyday observation is this week.
Oof, I don't know. That is a very good one. I might have to think. I share the one of the ticks, but then talking. But you know what? I'm going to just receive or tell you a mundane thing that I have.
I
This
love it.
is about like one of the factors that I really like of America. And then I was kind of like in the park the other day, a week ago, and then kind of like there were people like kids swinging kind of like between trees. I don't know how they get the swinging lasso between these trees, but then they were kind of like there just playing. And then there was one kid that was about to do it, climb up all the way there, and then they just tried to go for it. But then all of a sudden the kid seemed paralyzed, just couldn't do anything. And this is an event that is not the first thing that I've seen. Then which people like the other kids start encouraging him, start saying, "You can do it." And then there is not only his friends. All of a sudden, other kids go, like my kids who don't know this kid, go and then try to kind of like encourage the kid to do it, saying it's not going to be fine. But hey, if you kind of like are scared, it's okay to climb back. Don't worry. Just everything is going to be fine. We will have a blast. But then all of a sudden, the kid just got the courage to do it. And the cheer, that authentic cheer that is comes from these kids, is something that fills my heart. I've seen it like everywhere, from Nebraska to Kentucky, like this episode of kindness from people who don't know and encourage it. It's unique, and I really like it.
That's a great one. I love when observations include children. How lucky. Yeah. Well, what about you, Abigail? What is your observation?
Yeah, so I recently went on a hike in the Palos region of Cook County. So that's one of the largest like continuous areas of the forest preserves of Cook County. And it's really interesting geologically, but the site that we went to in particular was called Redgate Woods. And if people are familiar with that site from a historical standpoint, that is the site called Site A of the Manhattan Project, where the nuclear reactor was originally created in this area. And the hike was given by a master naturalist who's very passionate about history. And he talked a lot about how like the geology of the site was what made it perfect for putting this, like we were like, why are we putting a secret nuclear test site in the Chicagoland area? And he talked about how because Mount Forest Island was created from the glaciers, it's part of a moraine from the Wisconsin glaciation. And then when the glaciers melted, it broke through in places next to the island, like in two places for the moraine, which created Mount Forest Island, which is one of the tallest points in Cook County. And so it was an ideal spot for a lot of indigenous people because higher up you can see around you and defend. And that was the same reasoning for putting Site A on this particular landscape. And then just kind of seeing the that like natural geology paired with like human alterations of the landscapes and like places they had to dig out. And also it was like about 100-person small town of the Manhattan Project. And so just like all the different combinations of like human and natural history combined were just like really fascinating to see. And it's not like radioactive or anything. Anybody can go hike that space. You just come across it and you're like, that's weird. Like what am I experiencing here? And it feels also very remote for Cook County because it is a really large continuous forest preserve site. And so I encourage anyone to check it out if you're interested, if you found, like some of the Oppenheimer stuff interesting, or you just think that our history with all of those pieces are fascinating. And it's just really, like, again, this idea that like geology, things that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago impacted the choices that we made 60 to 100 years ago to now is just kind of interesting to think about, that, we're not really removed from all of this nature and natural history pieces. So, yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you again, Agustin, for just sharing all of your wonderful knowledge and research and the work that you're doing. It's really, really cool. It's really important. And so we just really appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Carter.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like, especially when you talk about toxicology and parasitology, it can be really intimidating because, I don't know, it just gets very confusing and involved very quickly. So it's really nice to hear about it just in kind of a applicable, simple form.
And ways that apply these basic ecology concepts to let's think about these ecology concepts, and they apply in lots of different formats for understanding the world that we have. So really cool.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of the Everyday Environment Podcast. Check us out next week where we talk with Nathan Alexander about pocket gophers.
Pocket gophers!
Yay!
This podcast is a University of Illinois Extension production. Hosted and edited by Abigail Garofalo, Erin Garrett, Amy Lefringhouse, Carla Griesbaum, and Darcy Weber. Marketing and communications are by Emily Steele.
University of Illinois Extension.